Cool. Thank you. Welcome everybody for week 8 of the farming forward, creating and monitoring functional landscapes. I'm definitely going to go for a shorter title next time. It's lovely to see you here. I don't actually have terribly much news. A reminder about the survey that we've put out to actually we're just asking for support from farmers and landholders on our future project designing. I'll put the link in the survey in the chat box as we go along. We've got the conference the 9th to the 11th of July. And there was something else, Graham. I mentioned it today and I can't think what it was that I thought we must remind people of. It's gone. I'll think of it before the end.
Oh, Agfest?
Oh, Agfest. Yes. We're going to be at Agfest on First Avenue. I think it's 14B or something or other like that. But it's you turn left at the front gate anyway and go down First Avenue and we're down there. So we're in with a group of other farm organisations and local food economy type organisations. And it's called something about, I'll put that name in the chat too. I should know it, shouldn't I? It's something about local food economies and food security and regenerative agriculture. So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you. That was great. Welcome, everyone. Just quickly thank the funders, the Australian Government, Future Drought Fund, Tasfarm Innovation, and we'll kick into it. So jump in at any stage. I just need to just do a acknowledgement of country. Sort of, I'm down in here. Let me grab a pointer. Right down in, oh, I don't know where I am now. Right down in here, this area, just on that lake. We abut that lake, and this is Tom's Creek that runs down into this lake. So, yeah, it was interesting because this duck shooters have been coming in for 70 years, and they were in on the weekend. That Victorian duck season's getting shorter um, and doesn't start till 8 o'clock, and a lot of other things. So, but yeah, to and just thank the Gunai Kurnai people for how well they've left this part of the world, um, and in good condition, good to go forward. There's still sort of, I keep looking, trying to find a better definition. Um, sort of just trying to sort of see if there's something else around there. I can't find anything. You know, Celia and I were talking today because I say that you can take landscape function to the bank. And there's a lot of practices that don't always work. But if you, whatever the practice is, if you make it increase landscape function, it'll get better and healthier. So, multi-species cover cropping doesn't work if you don't focus on getting more ground cover. So the first crop that I work with people to put in has got to provide that high carbon nitrogen, lots of lignified material to give you the ground cover. So, as I've said, and I've got a slide up further, everywhere can have 100% ground cover and decomposing litter. And the lowest cost, lowest risk way is to do it with perennial grasses. Otherwise, you're buying the landscape function, not building it yourself. And you can start from bare ground, and that's a really good thing. If you've got bare ground anywhere, start on that and go, I will make this have high landscape function and, lots of perennial grasses and very healthy. And once you do that, you can do it everywhere. And it's the same. Celia said a great thing the other day that it's only after you've done a certain number of monitoring on different lands or different or paddocks that are at different stages that it all starts to tick over and make sense. And which is what I did and what Celia did. We keep measuring, and all of a sudden you go, oh, and then you can start to see the links. So you need to do that. We talked briefly about profit. I'll do a little bit more today. and we haven't done anything yet on the well-being, but need to keep coming back because this is for the drought. We said that we'd get people and teach them how to increase landscape function for the drought fund, the drought hub. I won't stay on this, just the declining terms of trade. This is the main points. Eventually, I'll start putting in more detail on the landscape function, but this is what really are the big ticket items. If you want the land to be stable, infiltrate water and hold water and cycle nutrients, you've got to have these conditions of 100% ground cover comprising litter and annual plants and dung, a dense perennial grassland with large bases of the perennial grasses. And I think that it's 20 to 30% of each hectare covered with the bases of mature perennial grasses, so bigger than 2 centimetres by 2 centimetres. And then, but that litter has got to be decomposing to increase that water infiltration and nutrient cycling. And some surface roughness slows water, holds litter, does a lot of things. So it's that combination. And as we know, we drive that with oh, the recovery, stock density, and plant utilisation. I used to call it the grazing levers, and I just don't think that's right. It's too mechanical, but I'm still searching for a word that actually describes what I'm thinking of. I'll just turn that off, sorry. The truck driver. Um,
Graham, just a
oh,
question.
yeah.
Question. Yeah.
I couldn't see you. That's how I was going.
Yeah, sorry. Gosh, at the Rachel's farm meeting, we had one farmer there whose business is horticulturally based, it's orchard based, and we talk about all these factors and using grazing management to sort of create this improved landscape function. I'm just wondering whether at some point we might look at how we can do it when you've got horticultural based businesses, vineyards and stuff. My family's got vineyards up the northwest. So yeah, I was just
Yeah.
curious at some point
Yeah,
whether we do
I'll
that.
make sure to do that. I've worked with Prue Henschke from South Australia because she was doing wallaby grass in her interrows, and they believed that it made the wine better. And they were managing them with sheep, but there was a fair bit of mucking around with electric fencing and stuff like that. It wasn't. I thought it was harder than just what we were doing, but they had staff and they had people, and they found that it was better for the land, better for the vines, better for the wine. So they were sort of sticking at it. So yes, from Henschke wines. So um, I'll see if I can dig out photos and stuff. Yeah, that's a good point. So in a forest, you've got large basal area of the trees and decomposing litter between the trees. So healthy forest, healthy bush, healthy grasslands, healthy cropping, healthy viticulture, healthy whatever it is, horticulture. It will have as much perenniality as you can with decomposing litter between the plants. So all of them are analogs, so there is no um, other. So if you say, oh, well, I'm going to do multi-species cover crops and I'm going to do no till and no chemical and no synthetic fertilizer, all that sort of nonsense. What we find, sorry, I shouldn't say nonsense. I'll come back to why I said that. The what happens is that if you don't leave it to get mature enough and then you eat it all, it's actually damaging for the land because you haven't increased the litter, you haven't increased the decomposition, you haven't kept the soil covered. So cover crops, there's nothing wrong with them. It's the way we manage them. So they can do a good job for the environment, but most don't because people don't manage them properly. And the other problem with them is that they're expensive. They're high cost and high risk. So you've got to be really good to make them make profit. And Gabe Brown, and he makes more money than most do off their meat business. He can't make money out of them, and he's probably the best in the world at multi-species cover crops. And I always say that's what you've got to know and compare yourself at. If the best in the world, and I study, watch his YouTubes and what he's done and everything. If he says that you can't make money out of it and he's selling his meat at 3 times the standard commodity market price, how am I going to do it? Or how are you going to do it? I really can't see the logic of saying I'll be better than that. Do you know? I used to say I'm the cockiest person I know, and I go, no, I'm not trying that. Because he is so much better at it and so much more experienced. But they've taken their 20 years of learning and running their trials. He runs at least 5 trials. Sorry, he wants 5 things to fail. So he runs more trials than that, and he's wanting things to fail. He's doing things now, like he joins his heifers for, he wants the most fertile, and everyone else that doesn't get into calf. And if he
Could
can't,
could you just
sorry,
repeat that, Graham? You just froze there for a minute.
oh,
About
oh,
how Gabe wants to carve on the first
oh,
cyclone.
well,
I thought he
yeah.
was
So
just thinking it.
yeah.
So did I.
He only joins his heifers for 1 month. Is that where I was up to?
Yep, yep, that was it.
And he wants 50% of them not to get in calf because they're so long lived and so that he's only selecting. And if more than 50% get in calf, he runs them harder to make sure that only the best get in calf and the most fertile. I don't know anyone else anywhere that's talking about that sort of stuff. But he's got the pipeline full of cows. He makes a fortune out of those heifers, selling them into his meat business. Or this is Paul and Jazz, sorry. Gabe's sort of not doing it, but that's what when I was working with him and he was doing it. So Paul and Jazz are now doing that management. And, so it's completely different thinking, isn't it? Like we're trying to get 95% in calf. Well, down here we are. And then, and here's someone trying to make sure only 50% get in calf. And they've got it, that 50% have got to get in calf in 30 days. It's just, yeah. So I keep thinking there's what the point I was trying to make is there's nothing wrong with cropping cereals as long as you're cropping them into decomposing litter. There's nothing wrong with vegetable production because standard vegetable production is worse for the planet than any sort of grazing on perennial grass. Even bad perennial grass grazing is better than conventional vegetable production. That's all bare ground, nitrogen fertilizer, herbicides, fungicides, insecticides. It's a bloody disaster. But, so when I say to the people pushing um, plant-based things, I go, well, you're going to have to learn how to grow it properly because you'll destroy the planet if we all go bloody plant-based. And it sort of sits them up and tries to get the discussion going. But yeah, so one of the things is if you increase landscape function in any environment, you will increase stability, water infiltration, nutrient cycling. So that's why in RANT, we say it's the foundation of everything you do. Then once you've built that foundation, then you can build your species and your diversity. And then you've got something to build on then, but you've got to get that foundation going. So until you get that soil surface, so this is what we're managing, the soil surface, so that you've got that 100% ground cover with decomposing litter, you really need to start focusing on that, and that's what you should be doing in your trials. I have been checking. Has anyone put in any trials? Anyone? You have, Rob, haven't you?
I've started to con construct the enclosure, the water part, but that's all. Hopefully, I'll have it done soon.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we need to be doing that and sort of some of these other things while we're going. So, we can discuss how did it go, because there's always barriers that I don't see with people, or I think I've explained it clearly when obviously my history shows that I haven't. So, as other people have said, I'm not exactly the master communicator, and I was deeply offended. So, um, but yeah, so for every environment, every condition, rainfall, humidity type, you can have 100% ground cover, perennial grass basil area or other perennial shrubs, and slight decomposition of the litter. We haven't seen that you can't, but the majority of places don't, and they assume that you can't. And I've got a photo up further. I'll keep going. I'll speed up the machine. I've just put how to calculate that. Can everyone, when they get a chance to look at it, just that this is the way I calculate it. So this was while they were set stocked, while I was up in Queensland. They ate, they had 16.4 hectares. It lasted them 18 days. They ate, so effectively each day they were grazing 0.91 hectares. So the total area is 260 hectares divided by 0.91 gives 285 days approximately recovery. Just so that's the best way I've found to calculate what's going on. I used to teach people grazing charts and Excel spreadsheets. I've tried all those things, and I found that doing that, but that what's not in that data is that did that did they maintain or put on condition over that 18 days, and they went backwards. So what I'm doing when I'm shifting them on a daily basis or multiple times a day, I'm filling them up, and I don't think about how much they're getting to graze. I fill them up, make them content, make them have big long sit downs and ruminate. And then at the end of the day, how much did that take? Because if you start thinking about the area, you start pushing them too hard, and you take your eye off the animals and start looking at the land. When they're in the paddock, you look at the animals. Before they go in the paddock, you look at the land or the grass. So it's that thinking. I found that stops you from pushing them too hard. The big failure in all sort of rotational moving animals is that you get poor animal performance. And I believe one of the things is because we plan how much area they can have, and we look at the land, not at the animals. So you've got to look at the land before they go into the paddock. Now look at the animals. Have they had enough to eat at the end of the day? And is the night paddock big enough so that they'll be pretty happy in the morning, and you don't have to start with completely empty rumens. And I always think if they're completely empty and I've got that all wrong and haven't given them enough area, I go, oh, may as well just get my book and stay here and keep shifting them all day. So was that all right? Did that help with that explanation? Oh, we've looked at the Financial Week link. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Is it other people had a go at it?
So, sorry, just to jump back, I wasn't quick enough to get the mute off. So it takes you all day to catch their gut fill up again if they're empty in the morning. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Got to work really hard and sometimes like if they're sort of, most of them are full in the morning and quite content and they move gently, then like I can just sort of pace out their moves. They'll sit down and camp to, 11, somewhere between 11 and 1, and do some ruminating and sort of, you're sort of making decisions. Do I get them up? Oh, no, I'll leave them there. It's all very relaxed and stuff. But if if they're hollow, you just sort of got to keep moving them to fill them up, because we know what stock density germinates perennial grasses and gets the landscape function. So you've just got to give them more of those areas. So it increases the number of moves that you do. So it's that sort of thinking. That's the skill. And I always strongly say, if you really want to do this and learn how to do it, then come over and have a look, or go to someone that's doing it. Go to Marshall's, go to Justin's. Come over here. Whatever you've got to get to see these things so that you get that into you about watching the animals all the time. So, and gut fills, dung scores, drinking scores, all those start to become natural to you. So yeah. Anyone comment on Marketing Financial Week link? Anyone else had the time to have a look at it, have a think about it for the different businesses? If you want to shoot one through, anyone, just bang it through, and we'll have we can do it offline, online, whatever. Thanks to Charlie, Trevor, and Dominica for sending theirs in. I thought that was great. So just needs to be addressed, and you need to allocate the time and money you need to address the weak link onto the worksheets. So
I was going to say too, Graham, it just like even filling it in, even though we didn't we were a bit unsure about what we were going to write down, but it just generated some good conversation, and even afterwards, like after you'd said what you did last week, it was just good to sort of have a chat as we were sitting about. So yeah, I just think it's those good conversations that throw some ideas about. So
I think it's very powerful, isn't it? Some of this stuff of Alan's is just fantastic. One of one of the things is all those simple issues or items that need addressing, you just can tick them off, and it just takes the pressure out of a lot of things, and then you can focus on the big things that are going to bring more money in. So, and yeah, some of them are tricky to address. So when I was doing a lot of the drought work in New South Wales, what was it, professional advice and planning grant, I found that I'd go in pretty hard to people just because they were stuck and they couldn't move and they weren't talking to one another and all that sort of stuff. And I'd go pretty hard and become the enemy. And then they would then pair up against me. Initially they'd be triangulating through me until I became Mr. Nasty, and then they'd be pairing up and ganging up, and they'd get on with some things and start thinking about it. So yeah, it was sort of felt, because some of the accountants and things like that were taking that money and drawing up a business plan, and they needed more people stuff than that. So they needed sort of um, how do I go forward from here, rather than a business plan that doesn't go anywhere. Um, yeah, and then I really, I I really think we need to get back to this sort of, the next step is, have you got a budget and can you start comparing it monthly to take corrective action? Because that's what puts profit in the business. You've got a budget with profit in it, and then you get the actuals, and then you do the variation to budget. And then this is the actual management bit. You actually start taking the corrective action to make a profit. One of the things, I did this with a farmer up in the Wimmera and Wimmera Mallee area of Victoria, and the engine blew up in the tractor. And he goes, oh, it's all, been a waste of time and things like that. And I said, no, this is when we start doing the corrective action. And he actually made more money than he planned originally because he had to sit down and start thinking about what else can I do? Where is that money coming from? What can I cut back? Where can I get new money into the business? And that was what he did. And he actually beat his profit target. There's going to be more and more of this sort of coming out. This is um, a company I work with. I've forgotten her name, Minda Tracy, that does this online training hub for Excel and a few other programs. But this is this is Microsoft Copilot, which is annoying because it keeps popping up in my computer. But it's going to start doing all these reconciliation reports and things like that. But until you get that, I've been saying to people, try and do it for a couple of months. If you can't, get the bookkeeper or the accountant to do it. So um, there. I have to read that again. Sorry. Spiky, I just saw that message then. This is a really good, every time you see a photo, every time you walk in a paddock, assess the landscape function. Now, the group that Celia was working with on these and explaining to them about landscape function, she had to explain the difference between ground cover and rain splash protection because there is hardly any ground cover. There's a little bit of litter here and there, very small basal area, very small amount of perennials. So it basically has incredibly low landscape function, even though if you stood back and looked at it, I looked across the paddock and it looked pretty good. It's got some height to it, but it actually doesn't have any landscape function. So every time you can see bare ground, landline, on was it landline on Sunday? I can't remember where it was. Oh no, it was the supermarket. People were talking about vegetable production, and it had all the beautiful red soils of northern Tasmania, but they're all bare. Yeah, like it was just atrocious management. So um, so we need to know as soon as you can see bare soil, it's not what it's supposed to be. Good grazing, nice sort of heavy selection. I'd be interested in how the cows go, but you can still sort of see the drill lines a bit in this, so they should all disappear quite quickly. So, um, if you were managing well, this is Rob's place. There's found that hiding the hiding water pipe. This keeps beeping at me. It's annoying me. I need to turn it off.
Yeah, it took a bit longer than I thought. I had a feeling it'd be in the gateway.
Sort of makes sense, doesn't it? But you never know.
Yeah,
The soils really intrigued me. Like so. Um, it's sort of a rarity, isn't it? Sort of that soil. It'd be pretty free draining, but it's just so sandy and like the topsoil's dark, so that's got some carbon in it. But after that, sort of it's all um, yeah. It reminded me of some of the volcanic soils in New Zealand. So when I first looked at it, so
yeah,
yeah,
that's one of the sandier spots, though. Probably why we got so much cape weed there.
yeah. Yeah, it'll probably need longer recovery than the normal round, won't it, to sort of start getting enough carbon into it and stuff. Yeah, I think it's great that you're getting on with that. So it'll be interesting to see how it all goes, Rob.
Yeah,
The
I think
sorry.
that's probably the hardest part too. That's that's probably the hardest part, finding the water pipe. So
Yeah, you reckon the rest will be easy?
Yeah, I've got the ball rolling now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Um, uh, and then we've got a conical snail problem, um, uh, and crickets. So crickets is pretty easy. I had terrible crickets when I started near Hayward, sort of in the dairy area in southwest Victoria, and it was like that heavy black cracking clay. Um, yeah, and so it used to be thistles, crickets, red-legged earth mite. Um, it was like a rolling disaster. Army worm had come through and stuff. That's really what got me interested in all this was when I went, oh, geez, I'm just hopeless at this. So I sort of hadn't had my own farm. I'd worked on other people's farms. And once I had my own, I go, geez, I'm just hopeless. And then I went looking for advice and I got told that I said, we have problems with retained afterbirth and mastitis and foot problems in the winter. Everything was good for about a month there. And then we ended up with red-legged earth mite, thistles coming through, um, then, to dry off, and then we'd get crickets, and then you'd start again. And so I said, that can't be right. I said to the beef extension officer, the beefo, and he said, oh, what was the fat on your wieners? That was the only question he asked. And I said what it was. And what was my stocking rate? What was the fat on the wieners? Oh, that sounded about right, he said. And, I went, whoa, I just cannot see how that's right. So that was when I started. So, and I started chasing thistles. I thought that was going to be the easiest thing. Um, so I would go for ground cover. I would put in a safe to fail trial. The conical snails, I haven't had any actual experience with the snails, but I was thinking, Rob, when I was thinking about this, that a lot of those pests and things like that are controlled by the insect killing fungus. So, um, and I wrote this back in 2010 for Stipe native grasses. And, it was just like the conditions I saw whenever people had pasture pests, corbies, or because we weren't familiar with, I wasn't familiar with corby grubs. And actually, I'm pretty sure that there weren't many people on the mainland, so I wrote Corby's pasture pests in Tasmania, so that us mainlanders had learned from them because we don't have them. We have, the red-headed and black-headed cockchafers and stuff like that. And really, that's what it proved to be the solution was to increase the landscape function, get rid of the bare ground, no ploughing, no night. Well, I wanted to come back to nitrogen fertilizer. It's not true. Colin Seiss can use nitrogen fertilizer and he increases the pH of his soil. So it's actually the way these things are managed and used. But he uses about 30 kilos, about less than a third of the levels that most cropping people are using. And he uses it as a starting that nitrogen fertilizer. And there was a lot of Stiper members that would use small doses of single super because they felt like they were mining their land, even though their phosphorus wasn't going down. Um, and they didn't kill the native grasses. So I'll send that around again. And then if you've got any questions, give me a hoy about that. Is that all right? So it's about doing the trials.
Yep.
It's about increasing. There is no advice that I could give. I wouldn't poison them. Like what are they doing a lot of damage? If they are, then poison them. If they're not, but I would leave an area that you don't poison everything, just so you can see what the difference was. So, and the crickets are until you get so most problem insects and plants and animals require you've got to create the conditions for them. You've got to create food, water, and shelter. So with the crickets, you're providing them with shelter with the cracking. So you've got to stop the cracking, and you stop the cracking by increasing the landscape function. And it's the same if you do want things, you've got to provide food, water, and shelter. So it's Aldo Leopold's original work. He was like one of the original ecologists, and his early books were just excellent for this sort of thinking. Um, you know, these animals move in. What are the welfare conditions that this animal needs? What are the decimating? So the welfare conditions are always food, water, and shelter. And if you think about it that way, I find I can sort of solve these things by doing stuff. I was going to quickly go through some of the eating stuff. Um, had a request a couple of weeks ago. Is that okay with people if we go on to that now, or do you want to discuss any of the insects, or has anyone got sort of any insect that's eating you out of house and home? Insects or weeds are all the same sort of thing, forbs and annuals. They're all down from recovery's too short and not enough grass, and the woody types up the other end are from not clearing the growth points of the grasses. So that creates the conditions for the infantile tap roots to establish into. So we create the conditions for these plants, and it's really how do I not create those conditions? And for all the annuals and forbs, I always think, how can I grow more perennial grass rather than how do I kill, the cape weed or the thistles or whatever, which is where I all came in. Yeah. Everyone okay to go on to this? This is a friend of mine. Sorry, there's a message I'll go to. Oh, good. Thanks, Spikey. This is his breakdown of his packs. So he has a 5 kilo box and a 10 kilo box of beef. And this is what he has in the box. So these, those 3, 4-year-old cows that haven't gone back into calf. So, we know from previous discussions, let me go back, that tenderness will be down because of the amount, how old they are, the ossification of them. So they'll be tougher, but people sum these things up. So if you've got them, if they're tougher, they've got to have more juiciness and more flavour. So you need them to be grass fed, and you need them to be fat. You've got to have them fat. So, and it's really hard sometimes with a lot of our genetics that have been selected for finishing on grain. They don't want to finish on grass. So the flavour will be higher on grass than grain, but you've got to then get them fat to get the juiciness. So I say that's why you've got to select the animals. Other people do weird things like sort of shandying grain and grass. And I go, well, no, it's not going to do it because we know only a small amount of grain starts to wash the flavours out, and for a short period of time. I've got a graph on that somewhere. I just can't think where it is. So we know what sort of animal that we've got. And this one here sort of is how this all breaks down. So as soon as I see it, I actually then start thinking about this as I go down here. I go, oh, that's going to be all right. Oh, topside roast, I don't think so. Do rump steak off our cows? I don't think so. So rump steaks off a good animal. dodgy at the best of times. So some of the muscles are good and some of the muscles aren't good. So just with sort of talking about that, I'll show you how I do it. And I can do this for you if you want. So this is like death by PowerPoint. So just to just to get sort of centered, this is sort of the cooking method: grill, roast, stir fry, thin slice, slow cook, and corn. So that's sort of how it's treated. And then these are all the cuts of the body, but separated out into their individual muscles. If you look at the rump, that's what the whole rump eats at 47 off this as a grill. Whereas some of the other muscles, the eye of the rump, which is this rump 005, eats at 55. Now, what I do, and tell me if this works or not for you, is I decide a minimum eating quality that's generally as good, if not better, than the supermarket. So it's got to eat as well as, if not better than, the supermarket. When I first had my first beef brand, that was very, very easy before the supermarkets picked up the MSA grading, because there's on average 8 at 50. I made mine eat at 55, 57, and only sold, the brand only sold meat that ate at that. And people just couldn't get enough of it. I was sort of struggling between doing that, and at the time I was working for MSA, so I was away too much, and I was getting paid consultant rates. So the meat business could have gone, but what I should have done was got someone else to run it. Sort of, it's always been my uh, sort of a bit of a weakness. I struggle working with employing people, let's say. I swore that I never would when I worked in my 20s in London. I'd never employ people or work with them again. I just needed to back off a bit. So let's go through this. I'm saying eye fillet, which is the tenderloin. It eats as a very high grill off this sort of body from that sort of weight. So bullock weight, this sort of level of ossification and not much marbling. So it eats very well. You don't have to worry about that. Scotch fillet, or cube roll, we call it when it's in the abattoir. Um, so a Scotch fillet steak eats at 62. It's just, as a grill. So you're trying to get as many grills and roasts so you don't end up with too much mince. That's always the game when you're supplying meat yourself. How do I get as much of these good cuts as well? So then the sirloin, or the strip loin, or the porterhouse steak, it eats at the front end, so towards the head, up this end of the body, sort of towards your shoulders. It eats as a 56, but down near the rump, it eats as a 54. So, they say cranial and caudal ends of the strip loin. So, but I'm saying I want that to be 55 or more. So at this one's a 54 down near where it joins the rump. I'll come back to that, but I use that the end of the strip loin or the porterhouse where it meets the rump to, if you can't get the meat graded, I use that to be the tester for you. If that's okay, you can assume all these others are okay. So he's got 0.5 kilograms of rump steak. So we go to the rump, it's a 47. So we tried, the statistician tried to develop the MSA grading so that 50 was the, pass above 50, fail below 50, but it came out to be closer to 47 for a number of reasons. So the rump eats below what people will still say it's good every day. But my experience was that if you had 200 people in the room, then half of them would say it was okay. And that out of that half that said it was okay at 47, there'd be sort of 20 of them would say, oh no, it was a bit too chewy for me. So so it really isn't where if you're selling a brand and you're trying to get more money for it, it's not really what you can do. You can't put that in as a grill, but it eats as a 56 as a roast. So this is the sort of, is it going to eat well enough? And you don't listen to um, the butchers, because they're not checking on ossification, marbling, and how fast it grew, and excuse me, did it go into rigor mortis at the right temperature? So, and it's really hard because sort of a lot of the butchers will say, oh, I always eat a topside steak and I've had really good ones. And I'd say to them, oh, but most people don't live long enough, because we just found over and over and over again, it didn't eat as a steak, it didn't eat as a roast, it didn't eat as a stir fry, it ate okay as a thin slice, which was to temper it down and cut it at 2 mil and make like a shabu shabu sort of. You cook it in the broth, Korean or Japanese style. That it'd work okay as that. And I have had it as I've forgotten the name. That the chefs used to love to do. Take tartare, so like they go, I go, oh, yeah, do we have to all the time? But they do all the marrow and stuff as well. So I'm saying rump steak, it needs to be a roast, not a steak. So shift it to a roast. 1 kilogram topside roast, no, it's got to be mince. But the round steak, which is from the knuckle, would eat as a good roast. So maybe shift the round steak to a roast as well, and then that'll eat okay there. Not many people like thin slice. I tried to use all the different cuts and it just didn't work. It was too complicated for people. The shin or the osso bucco, the forequarter shin's lower than the hindquarter shin, and as long as it's got enough fat in it, most people will be happy with that. And then the brisket as a slow cook, it really it'd have to go through to here. So as a casserole, not as a I can't remember what he had it as. So, and then that ended up with more mince and less of these because they had to come down into the mince. Is that okay? Did I explain that all right? Is that clear? So it's really knowing this that gives you the advantage of people. People hate it if you. So most meat in on the eastern seaboard before MSA, 50% of it failed eating quality, and that was too high. That stopped people from eating meat. And then when we got it down to sort of about 20%, um, that was too high. People would stop for a while. Once you get this and you start to get down to that, couple of percent of all their meat, they're sort of, and they'll forgive it. They just keep eating it, which is fantastic. So it's really knowing what it is and what you're selling. So this is what I've come up with. So those are steaks and explained. That is a rump as explained. Dice the chuck and the brisket. Don't let them choose. So make sure that if it's only cooks as a slow cook, make sure you cut it up as a slow cook, and then just increase the amount of mince and sausages. So how was that? Any thoughts, comments, questions? Thanks, Kate.
I was curious about whether the relative grading remains the same based on the inputs, or do things go all out of whack when the inputs change?
All out of whack, Lawrence, but not as I always thought. So, my like I'm a short cutter, like not that I'm short, I mean, I take shortcuts. So as long as that rump end of the strip loin ate all right, then it sort of works the rest of it, do you know? But you've got to get at least one data point before you start doing it. So if you're not going to grade it and get those numbers, then just eat that. And I found that that was good enough for a lot of beef brands. So eat the tail end of the strip loin or the last porterhouse steak, before the rump. And we did this. Peter and I used to go in and eat it, sort of thing. We'd take a little cooker and a fry pan and go in and eat it, and then we'd make a decision about what to do with that body. And if it ate okay, then the rest all worked. So, not that I was saying that it was Peter's large beef box, but yeah, I said to the other group that I'm not going to tell you the name of whose beef brand it is because Peter Reynolds sometimes watches these webinars. So, um, but you get it. This is how you sort of you've got to take control of the eating quality because you upset so many people if you get it wrong. There's no one, and it's good to know that you're involved with winemaking. There's no winemaker that sends wine out without tasting it. And this can have a really big impact on your business. And what they do is they don't give you great feedback. If you say, how was that meat? And they say, it was okay. I learned that meant that they probably weren't coming back. Yeah, only spiky if they grade there. Otherwise, I can teach you to grade enough um, to do this. The hard ones are this ultimate pH and temperature of rigor mortis and stuff. But we can infer that you really have to send a body and see if the abattoir works for your level of glycogen in your cattle, and then go from there. But then you confirm it by eating this last porterhouse steak off that strip loin. So, and that'll work.
Excuse me, Graham.
Sure.
Yes, so I've got a question. Can we grade milk?
I reckon. I reckon there's. Do you know the blood urea nitrogen and the milk urea nitrogen from eating grass and cover crops that's too young? You end up with nitrates in the milk, and that nitrates in the milk causes inflammation in the body. I reckon if you start running them on recovered grass, there'll be a few things change. Your protein will go down, your fat will go up, but your nitrates will go down. And I reckon that's the frontier for milk. If you could say to people, we have low milk urea nitrogen, I think that's a great selling point. But I don't know how the factories would do it because they blend it all back together, so. But I would have thought that people that know what they're talking about, so they wouldn't have inflammation. I think, good meat and good milk, they're like health foods for us. They should be our medicine. And at the moment, we're stuffing them up. So, um, yeah, so I think that would be a great thing to do. You'd have a much lower cell count. Um, so all round, the milk would be better. And I
How
felt that
about
once,
flavour?
yeah, better flavour. Sorry, who was that? So was that you, Rob? Oh, Charlie, I missed it. Yeah, it would
Yes, it
have better,
was.
yeah, it would have better flavour. Um, it wouldn't have that, like sometimes that metallic-y sort of feel about it and stuff. So it'd be better for you. It'd have better flavors. It'd have better phytonutrients. You could sell it as a superfood, Rob. So, but I just don't know what the the dairy company would do with it. So like it's a bit like this meat. The only way to capture that value is to actually sell it yourself. So. Anything else?
I've now got the instructions on how I'm going to get my beast chopped up, so this is brilliant.
So this is sort of I'm basing this on a 4-year-old cow. Typical results from a 4-year-old fat, heavy cow. So not big or anything, but she's fat, full in the brisket. She's got ponies of fat that will fat round her tail head, and all the ribs are covered. Um, so sort of bordering on looking a bit obese. That's where you want them to be. So very good. Um, other George Monbiot is always sort of a bit of an anti-regen ag sort of thing, and this just came out this week that he was giving people a warning um, about a new film that's come out in the UK on regen ag and saying that it's highly misleading and stuff, and soil carbon can't happen and things like that. So there is still a lot of those people that they tend to be. Um, a lot of them tend to not be farmers, but there's even farmers sort of saying this as well. So it's just not true, but it is rare. Do you know, like, um, we were trying, Scylla and I were trying, because I made the big call that there's more regen ag in Tasmania than anywhere else in the world. And, I don't believe in going in lightly. But I was doing per farmer. There's more people in Tasmania that are actually increasing landscape function and doing a lot of that than anywhere else. But so, and it's not a big number of farmers. It's only a handful in Tasmania, but per head of population or per head of number of farmers, it's much higher than the mainland. And there is nowhere else that I see that's better than Tasmania and the mainland, and for regeneration. So, and you know, between Asila and I have been and measured a lot of the continents. So I haven't been to Africa, but we've been South America, North America, and the steppes, the Asian steppes, New Zealand, UK, Germany. You know, there just isn't many out there. So I think he's got a fair case. There's just not enough people activating and doing things. And we've just got to continue to work on how do we get more. And yeah, I'll do that later. Is that you, Spikey, the spreadsheet for a 10-month? Um, yeah, this this sort of created a bit of discussion with the other group. This is coming out from the MLA, putting the sheep in stock containment during the summer and the autumn so that they maintain ground cover. And it does, it gives you a much better ground cover. So there's no doubt about it. It's just incredibly hard on the bank account and incredibly hard on the people. If you don't have the right infrastructure and be able to feed them so that they thrive, it is just a disaster. I've seen some of, there was where I lived in southwest Victoria, there was like one of those competition shearing guys. He was one of those, couldn't sit still, always doing stuff, and containment feeding sheep exhausted him. And I go, I've never had as much energy as he's got. He was about 15 years younger than me and fit as a mallee bull. So you've got to know that it's bad for the bank balance and it's bad for the people, were the two things that I always saw. The other, just to finish, sorry, I didn't look at the time. It's really interesting. If you like this, there's so many areas of the planet that they're now worried about the inorganic carbon. So the carbonates and other parts, the calcium carbonate and stuff, they're starting to lose them out of the soils. So the only areas sort of are these dry, aridy areas. Typically, though, with all these, you can see which areas sort of were the grasslands, not the forests. Part of Brazil was a grassland. I always say it's about 50%, so they haven't come up with the same answer as me. But we know, because we've got that video of Benjamin with his safe to fail trial, that you could regenerate Somaliland, very quickly and stop this loss and mobilization of the inorganic carbon. So now they're worried about, they've stripped all the organic carbon out of these areas, and the only thing that's left is the inorganic carbon. And that's also the same, like the Chihuahuan Desert's probably got the only competition with Tasmania. They've got a lot of regenerative farmers in Mexico in the Chihuahuan Desert. So they'll start to make an impact there as well. Very good. How was that? Was that all right? I spoke more than I was intending. I was going to ask more questions and stuff. So once I get on a roll, so thank you. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for your time. I hope that was worthwhile.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you next week, but do drop me some stuff and I'll try and remember the questions on the spreadsheet for 10 months. Okay.
A question.
Oh,
so I've just copied and pasted what Spikey's question.
I have another question though.
Okay.
It was just a reminder. A little while ago, there was a discussion about AI and breeding, and you mentioned, Graham, that you might talk a bit about what some people are doing in terms of bulls. It was a few weeks ago now. I was just wanting to prod you on that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll come back and talk about it.
Yeah, I've put it on the list, Graham.
Oh, thank you.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that stuff about the meat. That's great.
Yeah, okay. That was brilliant. That was brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope so. I'd love it, but a lot of people get very bored with me talking about meat. And instead it ruins the meat for the rest of their life, some people have told me. So
prove the Brazilians cooked right as well.
Yeah, they can't go out and order meat. They go out and order fish because they've got better meat at home. So, yeah. See you, everyone.
Good
right.
night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Oh, Celia.
Oh,
can you?
Yes.
Kirsten here.
Hi, Kirsten.
Hi. My internet dropped out partway through, and then I was about to write down that AgFest stall reference.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see it when I got back in again. It had come off the chat because it had
I see. Yes. It's 146B is the site number.
146.
And it's called Securing Tasmania's Food and Farming Future. Somebody with more imagination than me came up with that one.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much for that.
That's all right. Did you want the survey link too?
Oh, yes. Because I went to try and that's... Oh, no, it's come up now. Yeah, it's come up. Take about 12 minutes to complete. No, that's good. I've got that.
Awesome. Lovely.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, Celia.
Thanks. See you next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Bye.